Very good afternoon, Praveen sir. I can see you're online. I hope I'm audible and my video is clear. I'll wait for 5 more minutes, 5 to 10 minutes before everybody could join and we could have a discussion on our topic today, which is Consumer Protection Act 2019 and how does it benefit consumers, if it does at all. If anybody could give me a thumbs up that my voice is audible, I would be grateful. Also that my video is clear. I don't see any reaction from anyone. Anyone could wave or give me a thumbs up that the audio is clear and my video is also clear. Is my audio a little better now? I would be grateful if okay, it's better. Perfect. So it's already 12. I'll wait for another 5 more minutes for everybody to join so that we can have a constructive discussion on the topic at hand. Wonderful. Is my voice clear now? Am I audible? Is it audible now? I was just told that the voice was audible, so would be appreciated if another thumbs up can be given if my wonderful. I think voice is a little clear now. Perfect. We're just waiting for another 2 to 3 minutes. Would be starting at 12:05 precisely. I thank everybody who have just tuned up to the live session and have spared this time of their hours and giving it to the discussion. Thank you everybody for joining me into this discussion. We wait for 2 more minutes and I'll exactly start at 12:05. My regards to everybody who've just joined. Good afternoon once again. Just another 1 more minute and we'll be starting at 12:05 precisely. All right. Very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you once again for joining me into this discussion, and I would especially thank Tarveen sir for giving me this opportunity and this platform to speak on the said topic today at hand. So the present topic and the theme of discussion is the Consumer Protection Act 2019. Does it really benefit consumers? Is the question that we have to see in light to the new incorporation, the new legislation at hand. So the said discussion today primarily focuses on the changes brought into the new act. Further, an overview of the act in relation to benefiting consumers, if at all. Thereafter, lastly, challenges seen under the said act, and further concluding my said discussion. I would be reserving 5 to 10 minutes at the last of my session for questions, which I would be glad to answer, if any. And having said this, I welcome everybody to this platform and joining me once again into this live session. And once again, thanking Tarveen sir. I hope in times of such global crisis, everybody is safe and sound and everybody is protected. Having said this, I would like to start the discussion today. So, the 3 decades old Consumer Protection Act, which was the 1986 Act, has recently been repealed after 2 attempts made in the last 4 years. The CPA 19, I'll be referring to the Consumer Protection Act for brevity's sake as CPA 19. It seeks to strengthen the rights of the consumers and also provide a mechanism for redressal of complaints regarding defects in goods and deficiency in services. So even after 3 amendments to the repealed Consumer Protection Act 1986, hereinafter I'll be referring it to as the repealed 1986 Act or the repealed Act, the amendments made in 1991, 1993 and 2002, we still have problems that have to be addressed and which are unresolved. And there are new ones which sort of mushroom in our ways. But still, we see that the 2019 Act, which has come into force, is a progressive development. So the 2019 Consumer Protection Act brings about fundamental changes to the existing 1986 legislation, but it also brings new changes to the 1986 the repealed legislation. But also, in furtherance to the said new change, the fundamental changes which have been incorporated into the new act, it also envisages a central consumer protection authority, and it vests too much power and control in this authority without proposing any adequate administrative safeguards, which we should see in our later discussion as to what is the new change and what is the Central Consumer Protection Authority. So the Consumer Protection Bill was introduced in 2018 in Lok Sabha on 5th January 2018 and was passed by this House on 20 December 2018. While the bill was still pending consideration in the Rajya Sabha, the 16th Lok Sabha was dissolved and the bill got lapsed. Hence, the bill, which is the 2019 Consumer Protection Bill, came into force. Thereafter, the Indian Parliament on 6th August 2019 passed the landmark Consumer Protection Bill 2019, and which received the President's assent and was published in the official gazette on the 9th of August 2019. Having said this, we can see remarkable changes which have come into the CPA 19, the new act, which I may refer it to as. And a lot of things have to unfold out of these new changes. Personally, I am very glad to see the new changes which the CPA 2019 Act has incorporated, and which I will be highlighting in my next discussion steps. So the first change which we see, a remarkable step, which is the change in the definition of the consumer, which now lies in section 27 of the CPA 2019. So this new definition covers transactions through all modes, which includes offline and online modes, through electronic means, either tele-shopping, multi-level marketing, or direct selling. So here's a question that we now need to ask as to these new incorporations which we see into the definition, which is multi-level marketing and or direct selling. What do they exactly mean? So multi-level marketing is basically a strategy which some direct sale companies uses to encourage existing distributors to recruit new distributors who are paid a percentage of their recruit sales. Like Amway, for example, which sells health, beauty and home care products, is an example of a well-known direct sales company that uses this said strategy. So the new definition of the consumer, which has been incorporated under the CPA 2019, it provides consumers with a remedy in case of multi-level marketing also. Thus, the sellers at each level of multi-level marketing can now be exposed to liability under the CPA 2019. And this is not only restricted to manufacturers of the product, but to the all entities which are involved at various stages of production and marketing. Having said this, we can also see some remarkable additions into the definition of goods, for example, under the CPA 19. We've seen that the definition of goods has been amended to include food as defined under the Food Safety and Standards Act. So we now see that by including foods under this definition, this will bring the huge rising number of food delivery platforms within the fold of 2019 Act. Furthermore, interestingly, telecom has been added under the definition of services to bring the telecom services providers under the purview of the 2019 Act. Furthermore, changes that we can see under the CPA 2019 is that the addition of the ambit and the scope of e-commerce transactions, which is one of the major remarkable changes which the CPA 19 incorporates today. So the e-commerce under section 216 of the CPA 2019 has been defined as buying or selling of goods or services, including digital products, over digital or electronic networks. However, a catch here is that it is not clear whether offshore e-commerce would also be covered, or eventual enforcement of the CPA 2019 qua such entities would be given due consideration, which would be seen in our next further coming discussions about the same. The next changes which we see into the CPA 2019 Act is that the rights of consumers have been explicitly been laid down. And I mentioned that there are 6 consumer rights which have been defined into the Act, which includes the right to be protected against marketing of goods and services which are hazardous to life and property, be informed of the quality, quantity, potency, purity, standards and price of the goods, be assured of access to a variety of goods or services at competitive prices, and seek redressals against unfair or restrictive trade practices. So these rights have been properly included into the CPA 2019 Act. Furthermore, a very remarkable development which we see in the CPA 2019 Act is the establishment of the Central Consumer Protection Authority, which had a mention in my beginning of my discussion. So what is the Central Protection Authority all about? So the section 10 of the CPA 2019 seeks to establish a central authority, which is the Central Protection Authority. The central government will be setting up a Central Protection Authority which will regulate matters related to violations of consumer rights and enforce the rights of consumers. It will also regulate matters related to violations of consumer rights, unfair trade practices, and misleading advertisement. Further, the CPA may also impose penalty on manufacturers or an endorser if they are caught for misleading advertisements. And further, penalties can also be of subsequent offences in the case of the same. Further digging into the CCPA, which is the Central Consumer Protection Authority, the CCPA will also have an investigation wing, which will be headed by the Director General, which may conduct inquiry or investigation into such violations as per Section 15 of the CPA 2019 Act. Under the provisions of the CPA 2019, the following functions can be seen by the Central Protection Authority, which may range from inquiry into violations of consumer rights, or which may go on to passing of orders to recall goods, or which may go on to issuance of directions to the concerned traders or manufacturers. It can also go on to imposition of penalties or issuance of safety notices to consumers against unsafe goods, and so on and so forth. Furthermore, in the CPA 2019, we also see that district collectors have been empowered to conduct such investigations that affect interest of consumer as a class under CPA 2019, under Section 16 of the CPA Act. So they can investigate or inquire at the instance of a complaint or on a reference made by the CCPA. An interesting point to be noted out of this analysis is that there can be an establishment of a central authority, and there can be an initiation of action as a class, which comes as an additional mode of relief, which can be exercised along with individual consumers filing complaints to address their grievance, thereby having 2 parallel proceedings at the same. Furthermore, the new changes that we see in the CPA 2019 is about a remarkable introduction of the concept of product liability. So what does product liability under CPA 2019 now mean? So Section 82 to 87 of the CPA 2019 Chapter 6 covers an entirely separate chapter of product liability. And product liability means the liability of a product manufacturer, a service provider, or a seller to compensate a consumer for any wrong or harm or injury caused by a defective good or deficiency in service. There was no separate legislation governing product liability in India, though it was addressed under CPA 1986, the repealed act, if parties were to include under the ambit of consumer. But insertion of this product liability as a separate chapter and a new ground of filing of a complaint under this scenario is a very remarkable and a significant steps for the consumers at hand. Let's dig in a little bit more into what is the concept of product liability. So who can be made liable under a product liability action? There can be 3 scenarios: a product manufacturer, a product seller, and a product service provider can be made liable under a product liability claim. The product manufacturer is defined under 236 of the CPA, and The product, similarly, product seller and product service providers are also defined under the CPA, the new legislation at hand. Further digging on into a bit of what can be the possible ingredients wherein we can call for a liability action against these, against the product manufacturer, the seller, and the product service provider. So, product manufacturer will be liable under Section 85 of CPA 2019 if product contains a manufacturing defect or defect in design, or there is a deviation from manufacturing specifications, or does not, or the said product does not conform to an express warranty, or it fails to adhere to adequate instructions of correct usage, and so on and so forth. Furthermore, a product seller may be liable if he has not exercised due diligence in selling the said products from the manufacturer that he's receiving, the goods that he's receiving, or he has exercised, or if it can be proved that he has exercised substantial control over the designing, the testing, manufacturing, packaging, or labeling of a product that caused the harm. He has altered or he has modified the product, and such alteration or modification was the substantial factor in causing the harm. Or he has made an express warranty of a product independent of the express warranty as given by the manufacturer. Or the product has been sold by him and the identity of the manufacturer is not known, or if it is known, the service of notice or process or warrant cannot be effected on him, or he is not subject to the law which is in force in India, and so on and so forth, as we can imbibe all these things from the Section 86 of the CPA 2019. Furthermore, product service provider may be liable if service provided was faulty or imperfect or deficient or inadequate in quality, nature, or manner of performance which is required to be provided by or under any law for the time being in force. And we can dig into the liabilities, and we can dig in as to how can an action against these providers be claimed by referring all the provisions as mentioned in the legislation, and specifically for product service provider we can find the same in section 85 of the CPA 2019. Whereas the CPA 2019 has also been defining and illustrating what is a product, which can be seen under section 233 of the CPA. A little bit on the definition of the product which the CPA 2019 includes is that the set definition has certain enclosures, but it excludes specifically human tissues, blood products, and organs. On the contrary, the CPA 2019 does lay down some exceptions also, which can be claimed in order to dodge liabilities, which could be if supposedly the product which was purchased by an employer was not installed properly, or was not, or the instruction manual was not read properly, or if the products have been misused in some manner, or exceptions could be, defenses could be claimed if the nature of the product is such that the user should have known the associated dangers. In such scenarios, one can always draw exceptions from the said product liability action. Furthermore, remarkable changes which consumers can find interesting are that there are also new grounds that have been included in the CPA to file a complaint. So while the provision of CPA 1986 prescribed 6 major grounds to file complaints, which were maybe an unfair trade practice or a restrictive trade practice was adopted by a trader or service provider, or the goods brought by him or agreed to be brought by him suffered from any defect or damage, or the service was deficient in any sort, or there was high pricing, the goods did not lay out a proper display, and so on and so forth were a few grounds which could be taken up by consumers to file complaint. Whereas under the CPA 2019, now what we see is that this grounds for filing have been increased to 7 in the count, with the addition of introduction of unfair contracts into the CPA 2019. So the introduction of unfair contracts is also a remarkable step for consumers, and it does safeguard many rights and associated interests of consumers at hand. What we see is that in the previous legislation, a complaint could only be filed if an unfair trade practice or a restrictive trade practice was adopted by a trader or a service provider under Section 2C1 of the CPA. Now, unfair contract has been added, which further broadens the scope to file complaints and allow the consumers to challenge contracts which are unfair or which are unilateral or unreasonable, which is laid down under Section 261 of the CPA 2019. What is the unfair contract all about? So, unfair contract as defined is defined to include contracts between a manufacturer or a trader or service provider on one hand and a consumer on the other hand, having such terms which cause significant change in the light of the rights of the consumers, and including, namely, requiring manifestly excessive security deposits to be given by a consumer for performance of contractual obligations, or it can be imposing of any penalty on the consumer for the breach of a contract which is wholly disproportionate, and it can also be ranging to anything which is about it's on a reasonable cause, premised on a unreasonable cause, or in which something has been done which causes detriment to the consumer in any manner, or puts the consumer into disadvantage. So here is a catch, that the above provisions, now what will happen is that they would directly impact the financial institutions also, such as banks. And as stated by the Apex Court in the case of Vimal Chandra Grover versus Bank of India, AIR 2000 SC 2181, that banks also get covered under the said act. So this would specifically take into account contracts entered with banks or e-commerce platforms where parties are not left with any option but to agree with the terms and the standard conditions that are made to avail to them. And thereafter, these all scenarios with such a broad subjective definition that we see under which we see under the CPA 2019, the catch is that it is still remaining to see that how courts will now interpret the cases when it comes to online contracts and the issues involved in the online contracts. The next ground which the CPA 2019 expands a little to file consumer cases, which is very interesting, is that there is now an expansion of the definition of unfair trade practice under the CPA 2019 under Section 247 of the Act. So while the repealed 1986 Act had 6 types of unfair trade practices as defined under Section 2R of the repealed Act, the present CPA 2019 deals with 3 additional unfair trade practices which have been added, and which is a very interesting area for consumers to know about. The 3 different additions to the definition of the unfair trade practices are as follows, and I quote, that first is failure or non-issuance of a bill or a cash memo will also be treated as an unfair trade practice. Second, refusal to take back or withdraw defective goods, or withdraw or discontinuance of deficient service, or refusal to refund the consideration amount paid within the period as stipulated in the Act, or cash memo or receipt, or in absence of such stipulation, or refusal to withdraw or refund goods or services within 30 days will also be treated to be an unfair trade practice. And furthermore, disclosure of consumers' personal information to any other person unless the disclosure is made in accordance with the provision of any act for the time being in force or in public interest will also be considered as an unfair trade practice, which remarkably has associated benefits, but there's certain catch that we have to see here. What we have to see is that this provision fails to give any clarity whether information can be shared if consent is taken from the consumers or not. The reliance will have to be placed on prevalent data protection laws in this scenario. The current data protection law in India does not require any specific compliance for data sharing in case the information is not in the nature of sensitive information. And when I say sensitive information, I mean information which includes passwords or financial information or physical or sexual orientation, medical records, biometric information, and so on and so forth. Having said this, there are also certain changes and new additions that we see in the CPA 2019. Changes with respect to penalty for false and misleading advertisements, which we've already discussed in the beginning of the discussion. That the CPA 2019, the new act, as it empowers the CCPA, the authority, it empowers the authority to take action against any false or misleading advertisements by violators if they see anything of that sort happening. But now here's a catch in this as well. It is important to note that such penalty can be imposed on endorsers too, and thereby bringing actors and actresses also under the ambit of consumer protection. So this will now make endorsers, actors and actresses to doubly ensure and to do due diligence in relation to signing up of any advertisement or any sort of an endorsement which they plan to go forward with. Furthermore, good changes which we see which benefits the consumers could be that there has been an provision of adoption of mediation by the parties. If parties consent to the same, the matter could be solved by entering into mediation, which is dealt by the section 74 till 81 of the CPA under chapter 5. So this chapter provides for settlement of disputes by way of mediation. And if the parties agree for mediation and the matter is resolved, it's well and good, but if it doesn't, the matter proceeds on its own. Furthermore, there can be many more remarkable changes which we see benefiting the consumers at hand that come into the picture, which I highlight specifically that now consumers also have an option to file complaints electronically under section 35(1) of the CPA. However, right now, presently, there is no embargo against foreign parties under CPA under the CPA 2019, whether or not they'll be liable for any action, or as I mentioned in my discussion beforehand about offshore online platforms, whether or not these services could be included under the ambit of 2019 are still some areas that we need to see how the same would be interpreted. Furthermore, certain remarkable changes which may be remarkable and which may also have some shortcomings, which we will see in the next, in the later of our discussion, is about the changes in the pecuniary jurisdiction under the CPA 2019. As we know that the district commission's pecuniary jurisdiction has been increased from 20 lakhs to 1 crore. And for the state commission, it's increased from 1 crore to 10 crores, and for the national commission, it's for more than 10 crores, which have certain consequences of its own also, which I'll be dealing in my further discussion. So, having noted all these remarkable changes which the Consumer Protection Act 2019 has given us, we now analyze and we see the overview of the said act. Personally, it feels as if it's like a curate's egg. When I say a curate's egg, I mean that it has some good parts also, and it has some parts which are still termed to be lacunas into the said act, which we'll be dealing in the further course of our discussion. But surprisingly, all these changes in the CPA 2019 signify an attempt to create more transparency in the marketplace through legislative protection with a view to ensure that consumer interests is supreme. The Consumer Protection Act 2019 continues to have redressal commissions at the three levels: the district, the state, and the national level. However, the pecuniary jurisdiction, which thereby is the monetary value of complaints that can be entertained, of each of these commissions have been substantially increased, which to reduce the burden on the states and national commissions by encouraging consumers to approach district commissions for complaints which are valued up to rupees 1 crore. However, we have consequences of the same and would be dealt when I speak about challenges of the CPA 2019. Furthermore, the jurisdiction of the consumer commissions have also been expanded to allow complaints to be made wherever the complainant resides or personally works for gain or for business, as opposed to the 1986 Act, wherein the complaints had to be instituted where the opposite party resided or concluded business or where the cause of action arose. This with an intent that it will ease the burden on consumers, that they can file complaint wherever they reside, and they wouldn't be running from pillar to post in terms to their complaint, is an attempt to expand the said jurisdiction in terms of complainant. Furthermore, notably, the admissibility of complaints made to the consumer commissions are to be decided within 21 days. This provision was also intact under the 1986 Repealed Act 2. However, a remarkable change which consumers can now see happening is that if supposedly the complaint is not decided within such time period of 21 days, it's deemed to be admitted. And one can't overstate what a remarkable addition this is, as it does away with the languishing of complaints at a pre-admission stage, as had become a current practice, at least if you speak for National Commission. But, however, with all regrets, I would have to say that corresponding procedural amendments have not been introduced, which raise some doubts about the practical efficacy of the said proposition, about the said legislation at hand, the said provision at hand. Furthermore, the 2019 Act also introduces the power of judicial review, which would allow consumer commissions to review their orders. They were reducing the burden which they face, or which they faced on account of appeals being preferred to rectify errors apparent on the face of the record. Having said this, these were all different changes which we see into the 2019 Act. Then we analyze side by side, we analyze as to how would they benefit the consumers, and speaking a little on few lacunas present, which takes me to my next and perhaps the last end of my discussion, the course of my discussion, which is, no matter how good the changes are at hand, we still have to address various issues. We still see some looming areas under the 2019 Act which may create a problem. So, as I start with that, the new legislation has created a central consumer protection authority to regulate matters relating to violations of consumers, unfair trade practices, misleading advertisements, which is very good. But it's very unclear as to how this authority will practically function, especially since existing district collectors, as I mentioned in my discussion, they have also been tasked to undertake certain functions pertaining to inquiries and investigations. So there is a considerable overlap which we can see right now between the investigating wing and between the district collector offices, which may lead to a potential conflict of interest. Furthermore, this authority is empowered to recall it's empowered to order for recall of goods, reimburse price paid for goods and services, as well as issue directions to penalize manufacturers, as I just made you go through all of them. And the appeals against such orders of the authority can only be preferred before the National Commission as per the Act. So the factors on which the National Commission may hear such appeals right now is totally unclear, and one only hopes it doesn't lead to the opening of a Pandora's box once again. Furthermore, at this point, one thing is also unclear as to whether matters currently which are pending under the consumer commissions will continue, or if they're likely to get transferred based upon the pecuniary jurisdiction that we've just seen which have increased. So this adds to the further ambiguity of the Act. Furthermore, we see that the time limit of disposal of the consumer complaints was from 3 to 5 months, ranging from 3 if there was no scrutiny to be done of the goods, and 5 months ranging from 3 if no scrutiny to be done on goods, and 5 if lab tests had to be done. So this 3 to 5 months time for disposal of consumer complaint, I feel, is a cruel joke, as a single adjournment may last longer, and we all know into practice. And unlike statutes like Arbitration Act, in which filing applications are done with strict words which read as "but not thereafter," but in the consumer law, the words "sufficient cause" can be stretched to periods of condonation of delay, and surprisingly, the Act does not at all fill these loopholes. Furthermore, the qualifications of members of the Commission is also yet to be seen in light to the CPA 2019, which lays down that the central government has the power and will notify the qualifications of the Commission members. Further, as the Act leaves the method of appointment of members to the central government, I feel wouldn't this executive involvement undermine the independence of the Commission, which are few questions in hand that we need to see before we venture into the practice of CPA 2019. Finally, I conclude thereby by saying that all in all, the 2019 Act is definitely a positive step towards reformation and development of consumer laws in the light of dynamically changing socio-economic developments. But the real test for the 2019 Act, I feel, is the implementation aspect, and that some leeways do need to be given for it to actualize the relief of the consumers. But in totality, we do see a good ray of hope for consumers today at hand. And with this, I would like to conclude my discussion, and I would be happy if I would be posed with any questions, or we could engage in a constructive discussion about the 2019 Act. I would also like to mention that if viewers may view the said video, and if the viewers are not viewing the video as live and view it after some time, maybe in due course of the day or whenever it is shared with all of you, you may always have my Facebook account details or Instagram handle details, and can always put in questions, and I would love to engage in a constructive discussion of the same. I'll wait for 5 minutes for any questions if around. Absolutely. All right. Something about the impact Tarveen sir has just asked me, the impact of COVID-19 on consumer laws. And I have another question. Can you please tell about if deficiency in service? I will go one by one. Let's go with Mr. Tarveen sir. Something about the impact of COVID-19 on consumer laws, I feel would have a lot of enlarging effects, because right now we see the effect of COVID-19 on manufacturers and businesses, in which businesses are not running and manufacturers are not being able to manufacture anything. Um, uh, Having said this, I feel in the due course, when businesses do come up and manufacturers start again with launching their products, we may then see how the litigation arises between the same. But on this forum, I feel there wouldn't be far-reaching effects on in terms to businesses being stopped because of COVID-19. However, I feel that we do have the problem of, say, for performance of a contract, wherein because of COVID-19 times, we as consumers have been suffering a lot based on if we order, say, a product, a specific product, and that product could not reach to us because of the prevalent times, because of the lockdown, the restrictions imposed. So some nuances in which when the e-commerce websites or the sellers, they do not deliver us the desired product. In such situation, what does the consumer have to do is something which we are facing today. Herein comes the picture of the force majeure clause, that certain contractual obligations which cannot be performed due to an adversity or a pandemic like this will not lead to any manufacturer or a seller to be liable. A few impacts and few consequences which I feel would be arising due to the COVID-19 pandemic to be thought about as of now. Next question that I would like to address is about could you please tell about if deficiency in service by education institutions during lockdown? How can we complain? So as I again just mentioned about the force majeure clause as to certain obligations which cannot be performed, if certain services are not being able to be rendered by education departments, is only because of the lockdown that we can see right now. We would have to see what sort of service has been disrupted, because I feel that right now education institutes are providing with online platforms of coming up and conducting classes. So here we would have to see what is the deficiency in service, and then maybe we can take a call. We can see a next question coming. Can you please elaborate on the applicability of the 2019 Act? There is some confusion as to whether, as of now, fresh complaints will be filed under the 2019 or the 1986 Act. Absolutely. Based on, thank you for your question. So, based on the applicability, right now, I feel that the filing of the said complaints would be under the 1986 Act, because till December 31st, the said Act had to be notified by the center. But though it has been passed and we have an act at hand, but 31st December was the date when the notification by the central government had to come out. But unfortunately, the same was then delayed too, and still we see that it was all in the news that the authority which had to be established by the CPA is yet to see the rules, and it's yet to see different guidelines coming up from the central government. So it's all in a nascent stage wherein the center is trying to formulate different guidelines as to e-commerce or as to how the authority will function, which is all under the news until April. This April itself, the center had to release a fresh document of rules, of guidelines in relation to authorities, which has still not come as yet. So the filing of of fresh complaints would be done under the 1986 Act as per no notification by the central government. Go to the next question. Okay. Sarveen sir, the question I would read out is, in medical negligence cases, what do you think is better option to claim compensation? A consumer complaint or a civil suit for damages? Can both run simultaneously? Definitely, Sarveen sir, thank you for this question. I did a moot actually when I was in my third year of law school, which was on medical negligence. It's a very interesting area that we see in law, and these are few questions which we struggle while when we are engaged into a medical negligence case. A medical negligence case is a very serious case at hand, because we either see cases in which the doctor is negligent in performing his operation or a duty, thereby which maybe it leads to a fatal death or an amputation of a certain part of the body. So in such a case, as consumer courts have been set up in order to give a speedy remedy in terms to cases filed, it is advisable to file a consumer complaint. But supposedly, if the damages claimed are on the higher side of the said course, the case can also be filed as a civil suit. But nonetheless, the next question of the sir is, can both run simultaneously? I feel on this aspect, if the question of law in terms to if the questions arising from both the complaints are maybe different, then they can definitely run simultaneously. But if they claim the same damage, I feel they cannot run simultaneously. Right.